Gaslighting. Most of us have heard of it, and some have been a victim of it. But what is it? Gaslighting is a term derived from the title of a 1938 British stage play, Gaslight, which was subsequently produced as a film in the United States and in the United Kingdom. The story is of a husband who used trickery to convince his wife that she's mentally unwell in order to steal from her. Now, gaslighting refers to manipulative behavior, where the manipulator tries to get us to question our own reality, memory, or perceptions, usually so that the gaslighter can reap some benefit. In abusive relationships, the gaslighter doesn't acknowledge their behavior even when they're called out on it. However, there are shades of gray when it comes to interpreting if communications between two people in a relationship are evidence of gaslighting with malicious intent or unconscious habit. For example, dismissive emotional communications are often normalized in adult relationships and are not necessarily uttered with a specific malicious intent, yet they can still leave the person on the receiving end questioning their reality. Either way, as the victim of gaslighting, no matter what our experience looks like, we can easily feel powerless. Our reality feels distorted, and we're not sure who or what we should believe anymore. So, how do you retain your power and respond to a gaslighter? Well, in this 12-minute video, we are going to go over the difference between malicious gaslighting versus unconscious dismissive communications that have been normalized in relationships. And we are also going to discuss 5 tips for responding to gaslighting while regaining your power. By the end, you will gain a deeper understanding of gaslighting, how it works, and some specific examples. Tools for responding to someone who is gaslighting you, whether it's with malicious intent or not, and an action plan for regaining your power when you feel like you have been gaslit. Now, before we dive into it, if you are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Briana MacWilliam, and I am a licensed and board-certified creative arts therapist with more than 15 years in the field, helping adults struggling with insecure attachment go from self-doubting to self-sovereign so they can attract the soul-shaking, passionate partnerships that they want. And I do this using a psycho-spiritual approach to creative arts interventions, which I call the MacWilliam method. The content on my YouTube channel is derived from my online courses, which you can learn more about through the link in the caption of this video. If you would like to learn more about your attachment style, you can take the 4-question quiz. If you like what you see and hear and you want to learn more, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. I put out videos once a week, and I wouldn't want you to miss out. Okay, so let's get started. Differentiating between gaslighting and normal relationship communications is where we'll begin. So when we think about gaslighting, we often think of it in terms of a manipulative person in our life who is intentionally trying to make us question our reality and extort some kind of reward. However, there are also less malicious forms of gaslighting that can occur in relationships where dismissive emotional communications have become normalized. So for example, if your partner regularly invalidates your feelings or your thoughts, you can start to doubt yourself and question your reality. These communications can leave you feeling dismissed, unimportant, and like your thoughts and feelings don't matter. So how do we distinguish between consciously malicious gaslighting and less harmful yet still hurtful unconscious communications that have become normalized in our relationships? Here are 3 key differences. Malicious gaslighting is done with the intention to control in order to benefit from the victim, while normalized communications are generally not done with that intention. Malicious gaslighting will often involve repeated behavior, while normalized communications may be one-offs or sporadic. And thirdly, malicious gaslighting often escalates over time, while normalized communications are usually more consistent. Well, now that we've gone over the key differences, let's look at some examples of thoughtless, dismissive communications. You're too sensitive. You're being too emotional about this. It's not that big of a deal. Who cares what you think anyway? You're going to hurt yourself. I can do it better. Now let's look at examples of communications that are more intentionally manipulative and abusive. I didn't do that. You did. I never said that, you liar. Get your head on straight. You're seeing things. That didn't happen. Stop being stupid. This is hysteria feeding into paranoia. You should go see a doctor. Your friends are just jealous and hateful. They're making up stories to hurt you and shut me out. Your family is oppressing you. It's better to cut them off and only trust me. A few other common forms of gaslighting include child-parent gaslighting, political gaslighting, and racial gaslighting. Either way, as the victim of gaslighting, no matter what our experience looks like, we can feel powerless. Our reality feels distorted, and we're not sure who or what we should believe anymore. So, how do we regain our power and respond to a gaslighter? Let's look at 5 steps. So, number 1, recognize that you are being gaslighted. The first step is simply to understand that you are being gaslighted. People can thoughtlessly say something that amounts to gaslighting, but without the intention to manipulate. For instance, a person with strong opinions isn't necessarily trying to make somebody else behave the way they want them to, even if they're using language that can be close to gaslighting. So, for example, "How can you think that way? I think you're wrong." However, if someone is constantly trying to change your sense of reality by flat out denying what you see and sense and feel right in front of your face, then you're being gaslighted. To figure out what's going on, think of how the situation makes you feel and turn to trusted friends and family for support and validation for your experience. For example, Abe posted blatantly flirty messages and photos on his social media engaging with other women. When his girlfriend, Tanya, called him out on it, after a friend pointed it out to her, he called Tanya crazy and claimed that he wasn't flirting, but just being nice. He accused Tanya of being obsessively controlling for suggesting otherwise, and it was ridiculous for her to feel hurt. Then he demanded that she cut off her friend. Are you constantly in doubt and questioning yourself? Do you apologize all the time and feel unhappy, confused, or not like your usual self? Do you avoid loved ones because you are protecting a gaslighter who has convinced you that they're now the bad guys? In answering these questions, you get one step closer to figuring out if you're being gaslit or not. Number 2, gathering outside opinions. One of the most important things you can do to avoid losing your sense of reality is to talk to other people about your situation. Try to be objective when explaining your situation to other people and listen to their side of the story. If you share with more than one person, you get an even broader perspective, and your abuser is going to have a harder time saying so-and-so is lying to you. So for example, Tanya didn't like the suggestion of cutting off her friend, so instead she decided to show a screenshot of the flirty post to her sister and 2 more friends, and asked if they perceived the post as flirty. All agreed that the post was flirty and that Abe was gaslighting Tanya to deflect the consequences of his behavior. Now, one of the results of gaslighting, of course, is that you're not quite sure what's going on, so it's hard to believe even objective opinions. So how are you going to know what's real or not? Well, that leads us to step 3. Now, the third step is to document your conversations and your experiences. If you feel confused about what you believe is real, but the person who you suspect might be gaslighting you is often telling you that you are misremembering or lying, try keeping track of your conversations. Journal, record audio messages to yourself, take pictures and videos, whatever helps you remind yourself of what was really said and done. When you need to, revisit your memories to get more clarity whenever you feel confused. You'll feel more secure in yourself, and you'll be able to reference things in your conversations. For example, Tanya felt upset after her sister and 2 friends confirmed that Abe's post was flirty. She was embarrassed and angry that he'd tried to make her feel guilty instead of owning up to his behavior. But she was also afraid to confront him again because she was afraid that he might break up with her for calling him out. If she was going to pursue the issue, she needed to be okay with the possibility of Abe ending the relationship over it. And the only way she'd be okay with that was if she knew for sure that it was a recurring pattern and he was not likely to change. To gather her nerve, Tanya brought her journal to her next therapy session to go over past incidents that she had written about and discussed with her therapist. She also shared the flirty post. With the therapist's help, Tanya was able to clearly see that there were in fact many more examples of Abe trying to gaslight her into thinking she was crazy about a variety of topics, and that this was definitely a recurring pattern of his. Step 4. Make one small self-advocating decision. So if you are starting to feel doubtful or question yourself and your reality, take the first small step of disengaging from the situation. Take a vacation with friends or simply spend time with yourself to reflect and get clear about what you want from relationships and from a loving partner in general, separate from this specific situation with this specific partner. For example, moving forward, Tanya decided to focus on her own self-care and alternative relationships and support systems, so she wasn't solely dependent on Abe for connection, comfort, and validation. She wasn't ready to confront Abe about his flirtatiousness or his previous gaslighting behavior, but deep in her heart, she felt the relationship had an expiration date because she no longer felt safe or excited about being in it. The idea of breaking up with him was too scary to consider just yet, and she was still holding out hope that he could and would change. But she was willing to focus on what she wanted from a relationship in general, and then allowed that to be her compass for navigating her way out of the relationship if necessary when she felt ready. Over the next several sessions with her therapist, Tanya committed herself to more clearly defining her wants and needs in love, which also allowed her to more deeply understand the boundary violations that had occurred in her relationship with Abe. This fueled a healthy, protective, and self-advocating fire that eventually inspired Tanya to take action on what she knew. And that leads us to the last tip. The fifth step is to call the other person out on their behavior. And it may take some time to truly understand what you're going through. But when you feel confident enough, tell the other person that their actions amount to gaslighting and you refuse to be manipulated in this way any longer. If they respond by trying to gaslight you even more or deny their actions altogether, then you know for certain that this person is not safe for you. On the other hand, if they express genuine remorse and take responsibility for their actions, you might consider giving them another chance, but make sure that you set some very clear boundaries and expectations moving forward to ensure that the gaslighting behavior does not continue. And if it does, be strong in both word and action and realize that it is time to walk away for good. Tanya eventually took this final step with Abe. After a long discussion, he said he was able to see how his words and actions had been hurtful and manipulative. He apologized and said that he wanted to work together to build a more honest, loving, and supportive relationship. At first, Tanya was relieved and thrilled. She thought that they'd had a major breakthrough with their relationship and the conflict had led to deeper intimacy. But then, a week later, Tanya found out that he'd been texting other women behind her back the whole time. She confronted him about it immediately. He denied it, said she was being paranoid, and then tried to make her feel like she was the one who was being unreasonable. But Tanya wasn't falling for it. She realized that his apology had only been a ploy to keep her in the relationship, despite his continued boundary violations and gaslighting behavior. And that was when she knew it was time to finally walk away for good. If you find yourself in a relationship with someone who is gaslighting you, know that you are not alone. It can be a very isolating and confusing experience, but there are steps that you can take to regain your power and heal from the trauma of gaslighting. Most importantly, realize that you're not to blame. You deserve to be safe, loved, and supported in relationships. You want to be in a relationship where you are respected and you feel heard, seen, and valued. Don't settle for anything less, because your life, any life, is way too valuable to be spent feeling confused, uncertain, and powerless. The only way to assert ourselves with someone who gaslights is to reclaim our power by setting our boundaries and speaking up for ourselves. Through all of this, it's worth remembering what you're working towards. By retaining your power, you'll build strong, happy, and fulfilling relationships with people who do respect you and look out for you. Have you or someone you know ever experienced gaslighting? If so, I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you have any questions or comments or are willing to share your experience, please leave them below this video. And if you know someone who might benefit from watching this, share it with them as well. Thank you and have a great week.